Just slide and get your lick back. And get your lick back. I feel like I'm JX. J-Way. I'm a perfectionist. Adderall got me restless. I'm gone. Run with a wild crew, they get reckless. Young boy, come up off that neck. Give me that. To the trends. See a lead be the band.
Good evening and welcome to another episode of Corner to Copa. I'm here with my co-host, Coach. It is February 6th. We are 14 days away from the first spring training game starting. How are you feeling?
Well, it's about that time. We spent a lot of the offseason wondering and pondering the what ifs that could have happened against Cleveland. But now pretty much, I'd say 99% of the offseason, the dust has settled. We're ready to go, and the boys are ready to report.
Absolutely. And it just seems that every week now that we are having a show, we got some big news, big announcements. And earlier this week, it was official. Jack Flaherty is returning to Detroit. He seems pretty pumped about it. He's been posting a lot on social media. Detroit theme, the old English D, Tupac spitting at the camera with the Red Wings jersey and the Bad Boys picture with Isaiah Thomas. And give us the details of the trade. Do you have that in front of you? I mean, not the trade.
The signing, yeah. 2 years, $35 million. Believe he's getting what, 20 million this year up front with an opt-out after 1 year. It's a little bit it's kind of around what he was going for, I think, AV for a longer-term deal, but gives him the flexibility to opt out if he pitches well. I believe he would be paid a base of $10 million in year two with an incentive if he reaches 15 starts made in year two. So if he were to stay for whatever reason for both years, both him and Skubal would be unrestricted free agents at the end of the 2026 season. But compared with that signing meant someone had to go, and unfortunately, often injured Alex Faedo was DFA'd and ultimately traded to the Tampa Bay Rays, actually where he went to college and where he's from originally, down in Florida. So hopefully it looks like it kind of worked out for both players in the end.
All right. So you kind of talked about the incentives versus him just opting out of the deal. Is the fact that he has that that extra incentive and bonus if he hits that 15 start mark, is that a sweet enough deal for him to not risk it and try to just thug it out for those 15 starts? Or do you think that it's likely? I mean, we're assuming and hoping that he has another strong year, meaning that he would be up for a lot more money with an extension. But do you think that the incentive that we have for him is going to be enticing enough? Or
enticing, I don't know. I mean, obviously, if he does well, it depends. Obviously, if we're in the thick of it versus where we were at the trade deadline last year, I really don't think he gets traded. Looking at it now with kind of the development of the prospects that we got back in the trade and the fact that we did re-sign him, it was probably one of the best moves front office has made in their short tenure so far. However, in terms of staying just based on that in year two, I wouldn't think so. I mean, he really wants a longer term deal, and I don't blame him. I would be hard pressed to believe many people would be angry at him to do that if that's what he opted to do. If he had even remotely as good of a year as he did last year, this year, I would think he would opt out in a moment because he's got a chance to get his and secure his family's future. Not to say he hasn't been making any money the last few years, but time's kind of ticking on him. He's kind of on the back end of his career, if you will, a nice rejuvenation. So we'll see. Right now on paper, it doesn't look like it, but again, who knows what'll happen after year two in that regard. A lot of big decisions with the club in general that far down the road.
Yes. And prior to the Jack Flaherty deal happening, you were very, what's the word? You were very critical of what this pitching staff would be, especially with us paying Alex Caba that money at the age of 37. So how does the Flaherty signing impact the overall pitching rotation? Do you feel like we're a lot stronger now with Jack Flaherty? And who do you feel is affected the most by Flaherty being injected back into that the mold?
I like what you did there. Yeah, obviously, we'll talk projections for the rotation, but obviously, what we thought on paper before the signing looked like Joe would get his chance to be the fifth starter. People are going to debate that for the next couple of weeks till their ears fall off in that regard. But I think it's going to be coming down to him and Montero in short, as we touch on a little bit later in the show. But honestly, I think the biggest question with Flaherty, how healthy is he? Because look how long it took for him to actually get a deal signed that was still somewhat, favorable-ish in at least the first year for him, what he was looking at and wanting. Certainly nowhere near the years he was wanting to get. So it kind of leads to question, and obviously he had some issues when he got to L.A. I believe it was the Yankees originally nixed a trade after a physical with him. So you hope he's healthy. If he can give us 80-90% of what he got out of him last year before we trade him, I still think it makes rotation that much better because, Cobb only had limited starts after his injury, missing 12, 13 months in between the 2023 and 2024 seasons with that pretty significant injury that he had. You just don't know how he's going to hold up. And, we took a swing on a 2-year deal with Maeda and we're stuck with him. So I know Cobb's a 1-year deal and a Band-Aid contract, but you just hope that, a guy that you're paying that kind of money for 1 year doesn't just up and go up and smoke after, 6, 7, 8, 9 starts throughout the year. And now we have to go back to, the farm system to, stop that.
All right. And keeping the conversation on the rotation, obviously Terry Skubal was rewarded officially with his Cy Young Award. And, all things lead towards him continuing that success and competing for another Cy Young. But are there any indications that he could possibly get figured out in any way, or what is there any? Yeah, I mean, what are your thoughts on him making a repeat effort or improving more so? Because the hopes is that we'll be better offensively. He'll get more run support. But what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, in short, he is the front runner right now. If you're looking at odds and numbers online, he is the number one favorite right now. I wouldn't say he's a runaway because, Garrett Crochet's a talent. Can't deny that. And he's in a much better situation in Boston, wearing a different color sock now than in Chicago. And he's going to get run support too. It's obviously not a pitcher's park. It's a hitter's park. So he's going to have to combat the Green Monster in the pesky pole down the right field line there in Boston. But, obviously, remember, Skubal, too, was limited every 6 days for the last 7 weeks or so of the regular season. Right. So he ended up receiving a handful of less starts that would have gotten him well over 20 wins potentially. I think 25 is on the table, barring any time, on the shelf or any, anomaly situation where they had, there's the rest of the rotation around him crumble apart like last year. I think 25 wins is within the realm. The division is weaker. Cleveland shipped out a few players. Chicago finished their total rebuild for the most part. And they're going to be, they're right in the thick of the conversation for the title. So they're going to ride him till the wheels fall off. And I think in terms of approach for Skubal, he's got that elite fastball still from a left-hand side. The changeup was absolutely disgusting last year. Didn't really throw too much that knuckle curve, kind of used the slider to his advantage in key situations. So it'll come down to, will hitters be patient enough to lay off that changeup in disadvantageous counts against them? Or will they be sitting more fastball, which he did throw for a bit more balls to kind of chase first? Or will they sit on something else? That's kind of the general thought process on that. because he's not going to be able to just continue to pound the strike zone. That's not going to be the way to get these guys out. They're going to have to chase still. So it'll be interesting from an approach standpoint and pitch sequence how the not just the division but the rest of the league approaches the AL Cy Young winner.
Absolutely. And we're going to leave it on that note. We're going to get to our first break, and we're going to get to news around the league. All right, we're back. We are slowly getting to the spring training, and a lot more names have gone off the board. But what are the major highlights as far as free agent signings outside of Detroit around the league?
Yeah, so I think the biggest one that had impact, we were linked to early on. I know I was a proponent of trying to get in the mix for him. Pete Alonso at the last minute does re-sign a 2-year deal with the Mets to stay there. Was reported like 24, 36 hours prior that he was very close to Toronto. And people were starting to comment that, this might have been the biggest botch job that Alonso could have. But in the end, he does stay in Met, and that both New York teams are going to be absolutely loaded again. So he will round out that lineup. I believe probably projected to bat cleanup. The former Tiger Max Scherzer leaves the Texas Rangers, signs a 1-year deal with the Toronto Blue Jays. And the only other signing of note is that Jorge Polanco, infielder, does return to the Seattle Mariners. That pretty much rounds it out for right now. And as we know, I'm going to say this name only once, Alex Bregman remains a free agent at the time of this.
Yeah, he's still out there. Dana Brown has spoke many times and has referenced him in the past tense as somebody that is now gone and left. But I think who do you think was more likely? Now there's points in time that Alonso was all but gone, and there was times where Bregman was all but gone, but Alonso was more likely to return to his old team, right? Between the two of them.
I'd agree with that. He spent, he spent less time in New York than Bregman comparatively in Houston, obviously, but, I think it just made more sense. Toronto would have been just, a plan B, but reality would have been, I think he would have kind of been a little miserable over there considering their own inner turmoil going on, how they're handling Bichette. He wants nothing to do with an extension. Vladdy is asking like $460 million from Toronto, whereas he might only ask for 400 elsewhere as an extension. So there's more to play in Toronto right now inside than what the Mets have going. Obviously, they made a great run last year, wild series they had in the playoffs, and they're just more ready to be a NL contender right now than Toronto is, probably projected to be almost dead last in the AL East.
Yeah, I mean, I think only Tampa Bay is probably worse option at the AL East because New York's going to be really the Yankees are going to be really good, and the Boston's going to compete this year. Who else is in that division? Oh, Baltimore is going to be good again. So, yeah, for sure. So as promised, we're definitely going to talk about spring training battles, position battles, 26-man roster. I am gonna try to pull up here because I have compiled a 13-man list. Well, yeah, 13 position players, 13 pitchers with a couple bubble guys that can probably go back and forth that you may not 100% agree with, but we're gonna break it. And you see what we have going on here.
No, I cannot.
Okay. I mean, this is great for radio, by the way.
Yeah, that is. Yeah.
Let's see.
For those listening on audio,
Oh,
definitely.
there we go. There we go.
Oh, here we go.
Can you see it now?
We're just building the suspense for the audio folks.
Right.
Drum roll, please. Not while you're driving, though.
Coach, can you see it?
I can see your background. Yeah, we're good.
Okay, you can see the list though.
No, slide it over. There, you're good.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to read it off for our listeners. The 13 position player roster at this current moment. You guys can kind of you guys know what the positions are, but I just want to I want to first list off the players. So we got Riley Green, Cole Keith, Kerry Carpenter, Parker Meadows, Matt Vierling, Spencer Torkelson, Rogers, Gleyber Torres, Baez, Ibanez, Perez. What's Perez? Wencio Perez.
That's your boy. Come on.
I got the last names on here. Trey Sweeney and Dylan Dingler. You got to carry two. You got to carry two catchers, correct?
Well, yeah, naturally, yeah.
So okay. So here are the bubble guys. Now this is interesting because this is just interesting. So the bubble guys, we got Zach McKinstry, Jace Young, and Justin Henry Malloy. What are your reactions? Of course, this can be adjusted depending on how many position players versus how many pitchers. But I just did 13 and 13. Anything that you just looking at it that you would swap out? Possibly a Torque, of course, but I'm gonna let you go with that.
Yeah, I think it comes down to two things primarily for that list, and like you alluded to, Torkelson's one. Will he make it out? I don't think he has that. I don't even want to say that big of a leash. I think he has a very short rope, and if he cannot produce, and I understand, well, it's only spring training. You might only be facing a handful of true minor league guys, but that's kind of the point. If he can't get locked in and ready to go and put some good swings down, look good on video, numbers aside, I don't see him breaking camp with the team, and that might effectively end his tenure, at least, as a serious spot on the 26-man roster pending injury, down the road in that regard. And then the other aspect of that is, how healthy is Javi Baez? We've heard almost nothing about his recovery, his projected time to be 100% ready to go. And to be fair, and you and I follow him, and he's been awfully quiet on his own socials this offseason, posting only a few times in the last, 2-3 months? So
mostly with him on vacation,
Yeah. Hopefully he's not, pulling a Zion and eating himself out of the league. I don't think he's going to actually doing that, obviously, just making a joke of it. But, there's a lot of mystery and a lot of hush-hush around it. So that's the other thing. If he's not ready to go, I don't see how they can bring him along even as just a backup. He'd be better off just starting on the IL, going down to Toledo and kind of working himself up to being 100%. So in that spot, you would keep probably most likely a McKinstry and Malloy in that sense. Young spent some time up, yeah, but McKinstry's got majority of the big league experience, and it just makes more sense. And from a defensive standpoint, he is better heading into the year after what we saw in limited action for Young. So that would be my only two caveats coming out of that, would be the issues or production with Torkelson and the health of Baez.
Yeah, and I mean, in this particular scenario, Vierling is your everyday third baseman. I don't know if Trey Sweeney, because like you said, well, if Baez starts the year on the IL, then Sweeney definitely is your opening day shortstop. But assuming Baez is ready, and assuming Baez is ready, it's kind of. Yeah, Vierling is definitely your everyday third baseman, and then you really don't have a lot of options I guess Ibanez can play third as well. But outside of that, I don't think you have anybody else on that current roster that could play third. Torres is obviously not going to move over and play third. So it's interesting, but I will say that keeping a McKinstry off the 26 man depletes a lot of your versatility because he can literally play anywhere. So that'll be interesting. Just to give you guys a preview of the article I got coming out, one of the position battles that I have is Justin Henry Malloy and Torque, because they are both, obviously Torque has a ton of experience playing first base, but they kind of play that same role right now. Right-handed power hitters, and they're on that, they're on the bubble. Malloy, I think that if he can cut down on his strikeouts, he's already proven that he can hit for power, and we'll just have to see how he performs at first base. But I think that's one of the reasons why Torkelson will have the early edge, is the fact that with Colt Keith being your number one first baseman, you got to have another guy, in case he crashes and burns and has to, play DH or platoon with Gleyber Torres. You got to have a reliable first baseman, and I just can't see Malloy being out the gate a great first baseman. Vierling, once again, could be tasked with that role as well, but once again, you got to find somebody to play third base if that's the case. So,
yeah.
So yeah, but outside of that, most of the guys on this roster are locks. Rogers lock, Torres lock, Green, Carpenter, Keith, Bierling, Ibanez more than likely.
He's interesting.
Ibanez.
He's interesting. I mean, briefly on him, with the position changes they've been making and bringing in Torres, that right side's awfully crowded, and we've already talked offline about. And we touched on it last year too. Malloy being a potential trade piece last year in a crowded outfield, and now a crowded right side infield. Is Ibanez now, barring injury on paper, as is, assuming everyone's healthy on this list, and the only reason they'd get cut would be production at this point. Is he just limited to pinch hitting? And that's pretty much it, because, Gleyber's right-handed from a hitting side too. So what you're not, and you brought in Gleyber to start. He's your everyday second baseman. So unless something happens, I really don't see how he's going to get as many opportunities as he did last year. And I think that kind of forces him to really focus on being an offensive minded player, pending some weird situation, if you get Colt moves from first to second because of a switch hitting or a pinch hit platooning situation late in game that moves Colt to second, and Gleyber comes out for whatever reason defensively, and then maybe that puts Andy at first for whatever reason if he comes in to pinch hit and he stays in.
I was going to say, yes. So he's got a couple of things going for him. For one, he's got defensive versatility. He can even play some corner outfield. He can play third. He can play second. And, I said that we don't have a guy that can play solid first base, but he is a solid, look at that first base. In addition to that, with a team that's very left-handed heavy, he is a, left-handed pitch, a left-handed pitching killer. So, as a whole, the Tigers were pretty poor against left-handed pitching. So he was one of the few bright spots, hopefully, with Carpenter possibly getting more opportunities and Gleyber Torres being added into the fold. We were stronger in that regards, but at this point, Ibanez is the one guy that we know for certain is going to mash left-handed pitching. Malloy as well had pretty good splits against left-handed pitching. So, yeah, I think that Ibanez does bring some things to the table. Can he continue the pace he was on against left-handed pitching? We'll have to see. I mean, because he wasn't very good against righties. But yeah, he's getting up there in age, and he as we progress and some of our younger guys start moving up the ranks, he could be looked as as expendable. But as of right now, he's a very impactful player for a couple of different reasons. So um, we'll see. But that is the position player side of anything. Any other thoughts on the position players and that part of it?
Yeah, briefly, and you can expand on this, after, or, when I'm done saying it. I'm not going to speak too much on it, just because I think it's a little bit of more of an unknown. And it involves Dingler. How much rope are they going to give him? Because obviously they've got a couple prospects down now that, are targeted to be the future behind Rodgers. And that was, Dingler had a great explosive year with the bat last year. It really didn't see much opportunity, didn't do much with some of the opportunity that he did receive. Had a home run or two, a couple extra base hits, but struggled offensively. He's still a good defensive minded catcher, but how much rope are they going to give him potentially, going into month 2, 3, 4 towards the trade deadline? And then my other thing too is, in the same breath, Torkelson aside, because that's going to be determined in spring training pretty much. So, I mean, when we break camp, if Baez returns and he continues to struggle, either side or both, how much length of time are they going to give him before they just say, you know what, we've tried, you had surgery, we brought you along slowly, we got you back to 100%, and it's just not working. I think it's probably time to part ways.
I mean, I think until we have a solidified everyday shortstop, which Trey Sweeney hasn't proved to be that, I think that Baez has a lot more of a leash than Torque does. As we in comparison to guys that are on their way, that could be on their way out. But yeah, I mean, the hopes is that he doesn't just come out and fall flat on his face whenever he does come back. Another factor to consider is Jace, a healthy Jace Young. Now that he had the wrist surgery, apparently, it feels it's feeling a lot better. So, he very well could just mash out the gate in spring training, and that's all pending whether or not we go out and lock in Bregman for 6 years, and then we got a whole nother situation. But yeah, there's a I mean, because Young has always hit throughout his way through the minors. So it wasn't until this year, it wasn't until he got to the major leagues that his power just disappeared. And so another thing for us to to monitor, and soon enough we will really get to see what's going on. But let's get to one break, and then we're going to get back to the pitching side of things. All right, we're back. Let's get back to the notes section here. All right, we good? We looking good over here?
Yeah, Gucci.
All right, bet. So let's get to the pitcher side of things. I tried to highlight the left-handed pitchers, but I didn't do that. I think that there's only 2 here.
I was gonna say the bullpen ain't looking too much different.
No, it's not.
A couple swaps, but I mean, yeah, a lot of familiar names.
All right. So we got Tarek Skubal, and this is not I didn't put the pitchers in order as far as the starting pitchers, but of course you got to start with Skubal. Skubal, we got Cobb, we got Reese Olson, we got Jack Flaherty, we got Foley, we got Holton, who was a left-handed pitcher, we got newly acquired Cayley, Will Vest, Bo Brisky, Jackson Jobe, Casey Mize, Kyder Montero, Kenta Maeda, and Brant Herder, who's also a left-handed pitcher, if I'm not mistaken. So that is 13 pitchers right there, if I did my math correctly. So we got some pretty notable, couple notable guys that could certainly be in the fold for the opening roster. So we have Hannafy, who had a pretty good, had a in small volume. He had actually a really good year from what I remember.
You did.
We got Englert, who is hanging on, hanging on the roster by the skin of his teeth. We have Sawyer Gibson Long, who missed all of last year with an injury, but in small in small opportunities at the major league level in 2023, he was actually really, really good as a starter. We got Alex Lang, who missed most of the year last year. He was what was supposed to be. He started the year as our closer, and he was one of our nastier swing and miss guys. I'm really excited to see him come back, because I think you combine him with Kaylee, you got two of the better swing and miss right-handed pitchers, in the bullpen right there. And then Lee, who I believe is just on the 40-man roster. I don't even remember his first name, full disclosure. And then we got Matt Manning as well, who had a couple spot starts on occasion and kind of fell out of the graces. I mean, I think him and Reese Olson were actually competing for the last spot in the starting rotation last year. So quite a fall from grace, but he's only a year removed from a pretty solid year starting. He had those 2 broken foot injuries from comebackers. But what are your thoughts on the pitching staff? What are your thoughts on the projected pitching staff?
I think they're going to give Gibson Sawyer Long a longer look. I think he has a better opportunity to break camp with them, just because of what he had done the year prior. And, obviously I'm not saying they're reserving a spot for him, but if he comes out and does what he was doing, picking up almost right where he left off, the year before he got hurt, I think AJ is going to lean towards having the extra bullpen arm versus having, essentially 6 starters. You got Scooble, Cobb, Olson, Flaherty, and you got Job, Montero, and Mize. Technically, you've got 7 starters, traditionally speaking, in that sense. So I think this was the other spot that we were kind of talking about, maybe deferring on. They're keeping Maeda, so I got to imagine that Mize, if he doesn't win it, he's going to end up being a long relief guy, kind of like what Faedo was last year. And I think that leaves, and I think right now it makes sense. You just put Job down and, I don't know if he'll start Double-A or Toledo, because I don't think he ever made Toledo last year. He came right from Double-A. So
I think he had a spot starter too in Toledo, but there's no way he goes back to Erie. There's no way, right?
It depends what they want to do. What they want to do, they had a bunch of minor league signings too throughout the offseason. So I would, I would see no reason with him not going to Toledo to start and facing better talent off the rip in that regard. And then Montero, dude pitched a complete game shutout against Colorado. Yeah, I know it's the Rockies, but still at major league level, that's an impressive feat in its own. And he had some ups and downs, and he pitched well in the single game against Cleveland. He came in relief for, locked things up for us when we were behind, kept us, with the possibility of getting back into a game there in the playoffs. I think he did a lot of good things on the stretch that earned him a spot, in my opinion. If I had my way, it's been real for, you're going to start though. And I'm leaving Montero in there, with that young mix with Olson. Those 2 guys basically become the quote unquote young guys of the rotation. But, I think it makes sense for Joe to get down to Toledo, get in a regular groove there, find his rhythm, kind of get used to some of the higher guys with some major league experience and go from there. But in terms of the rest of the guys in the bullpen, if they do what they did last year, even anything close to it, they're going to be just as lethal.
Yeah, I don't see any fall off, honestly. I think that yeah, I don't see any fall off. I think we only improved. We're gonna, like I said, we're gonna bring back a healthy Alex Lang. We're gonna bring back a healthy Sawyer Gibson Long. Reese Olson can't get any less run support. So, I mean, his record didn't even really do justice to how good he was last year. Um, but yeah, I think that a lot of our guys got some very resourceful, experienced guys like Bo Brisky were on the money in high leverage situation. Even Jackson Jobe got exposed to the most highly pressured situation. So I think that's going to make everybody better because most of this team had never seen the playoffs. Even guys like Holton, Foley, these guys aren't 21 years old. These guys are older, but they have you know they now have more experience. And then you bring in guys like Cobb and Kaylee who have had experience. There's really not a lot of weaknesses. You got a strong left-handed specialist in Herder. You got Tyler Holton, who's left-handed, but righties can't hit him either. And you got a very strong top three rotation that on any given day you've put out there. You got Scooble, Flaherty, Olsen. You have a legitimate opportunity to win because they're not going to give up more than 3 earned runs. And then it's still yet to be seen about Cobb coming back, but he's going to eat innings. And Jackson Jobe, his ceiling is his ceiling is infinite at this point. So very strong pitching staff. You're going to have injuries, but I see a lot of depth. I see a lot of guys that could be utilized in trades, push come to shove, because we got some guys coming up the ranks as well. But any other thoughts before I take away this screen and I get back on YouTube?
Yeah, I mean, the only other thing I could think of kind of off the wall would be as if, more so the pitching aspect side of things versus the positional players. Yeah, sure, the Mets had briefly been in touch with Detroit about possibly getting Torkelson, but I think that's done with them bringing Alonso back now. But I think from the pitching side of things, if some of these guys, 3-4 of these guys that are on your bubble end up having really good springs, there could be some calls made from some other clubs that, maybe had held out during the offseason in terms of wanting to sign a guy and spend that kind of money on a 1-2 year deal for a relief pitcher. And they may, opt for this less expensive route and call on one of our guys that we probably will end up setting down just because it's a good problem for us that we have, multiple guys pitching well. There's just not enough spots that possibly could happen. I think you usually see a trade or two, sometimes even due to injury, guy goes down for the year or he's going to miss 4 months, whatever the case may be, more than short term. I think that could come into play, but again, those guys have to prove it. So, it's going to be tough. And don't get me wrong, I think 2 years ago, Toledo was not that great. Last year, they ended up pretty strong down the stretch too. And I think they potentially could even be really good this year in terms of the AAA level. So it's going to be competitive. These guys are going to be coming out hungry. And I think to your point, post deadline last year, only 2 players on the 26-man roster had playoff experience, and that was McKinstry and Maeda. So now all these guys have a taste, and hopefully it just fuels them heading into this year that, all right, we made it as a wild card, but that's not the goal this year. The goal is a division. It's obtainable. We need to go to work, not just have fun. They played well last year in that stretch when they got hot because they were having fun. Pressure was not really off them. I'm not going to say the pressure is on them this year, but there should be a higher expectation for all of them across the board that, okay, now it's time to go take care of business and act like we've been there and done that.
Absolutely. And like you said about it, and as you speak about Ken Maeda, I mean, he's a guy that he's now an expiring contract. So if he comes out the gate and he's just getting torched, out of long relief, you cut your losses and there's at least somebody else in this roster um is deserved of that spot. So is what it is. He was a legend versus the LA Dodgers in that one series that we won. But it's crazy. As many times as I think I saw him play. I saw him start like 3 or 4 times. I don't know how the timing was, and he had at least 1 or 2 starts where he was okay. But yeah, that was a failure of the purpose was there, the thought was there, but that just didn't work out very well. But that pretty much wraps up our 26-man roster predictions. We'll, of course, revisit that once we get into the spring training because, that's just all on paper. The results on the field is going to be a whole nother thing. So we're going to get to our last break and see what else is up. All right. So, what else is on the docket? Is there anything else that we needed to touch on before we get up out of here?
Briefly, they were projected to finish second behind the Twins of all teams. The Guardians taking a little bit of a dip. And us just missing out on the wild card third final spot. But, those are just projections. I would say non-Scooble for team MVP. Who would you have as your prediction for MVP that's not Scooble by year's end?
My hopes is that it'd be Kerry Carpenter. I'm pretty confident and content with where Riley Green will be, barring injuries. But that's also where it comes in with Kerry Carpenter. I mean, I think that if Kerry Carpenter stays healthy and plays, a relatively full season, that's going to be major. I mean, he missed a full 2 months of the year and we still made the playoffs. If the way his bat to ball analytics play out, he's an all-star and a top tier hit, and he's starting to get that praise when you look at the top 10 right fielders or the top 10 DHs. He's amongst them, and that's on him only playing probably just a little over a full major league season, because he came up he missed 2 months last year, and then he came up about halfway through the year in 2023. So yeah, the projections and where he should be are quite are very high. So it's just going to be a matter of him staying healthy, and I think that'll be a very big impact on everything. Just the pitchers getting more run support, and just creating more opportunities for guys like Gleyber Torres and Vierling to eat. So yeah, I'm hoping Kerry. Long story short, long answer short, Kerry Carpenter.
Okay, and I got one other scenario for you. Let's say they're within the hunt of the division, trade deadline. It's summer now. Assuming they're not going to be soft sellers like they were last year, will the front office be buyers at the deadline to improve the team in any way, shape, or form? And I may not even mean just a position to add depth, but I mean a guy of impact that could be on an expiring deal potentially that the front office could get for fairly cheap for some of these guys that we've talked about already that may not have a spot going forward or even beyond into the following year in 2026.
Yeah, I mean, I think our window is open now to really try to be competitors. I can't see any scenario to where we're selling, And we have the second strongest farm system right now, so we have some trade pieces to work off of that are playing right now, with the understanding that we have guys coming through the ranks that'll be prepared to take over full time in the very foreseeable future. So I think that we'll definitely be buying um, come trade deadline, especially because we understand that Scuba was going to end up hitting the open market, and once he hits the open market, you know, Scott Boras is gonna mandate that he test the waters of free agency. So our window with the best pitcher in the world right now is right now, and then up to the next trade deadline next year, because he'll be expiring after that. So yeah, we gotta be buying at the deadline this year for certain.
All right, I'll get one extremely hot take in that aspect. If they are buyers, because it is expiring contract, I'm going out there. I think they swing a deal for a prospect or two for Vladdy Jr. That's my hot take. That would be my hot take, because he's got one more year left. He's only got one more year, so they could get him for kind of cheap. If Toronto knows he's not going to re-sign and wants to extenuate, crazy amount of money in that regard too. But and then let me get your thoughts too. Not only that, but let's say they win the division. Where they rank? Where are they going to finish overall in the AL heading into September in the playoffs?
Overall in the AL, if we win the division, I mean, I think it's safe to say the best team in the American League will likely be the Yankees, because who's in the AL West? You got the
Baltimore.
Possibly Baltimore.
I mean, the Yankees lost Soto, so
they lost Soto, but who they got? They got a lot of pitching and stuff, didn't they? Or
yeah, they were looking to move the veteran that they acquired
Stroman
last year, Stroman. Obviously they lost Gleiber too to us in that regard. But yeah, I really don't think anyone in the AL West, unless the Rangers have a resurgence of some kind. We all know the Seattle owner doesn't spend to win a World Series. He just spends to make the playoffs. So I really don't see them being a legitimate threat. And, the A's will be the A's.
Yeah, so I think that our biggest competition is going to be amongst ourselves, because, we tend to kind of beat up on each other a little bit. Although AL East had our number, one of the reasons why we finished, second in division, 2 years ago, is because the AL East destroyed us. So, but yeah, I mean, I think, I don't know. The AL East is always hard to read. I think that Tampa is always a tricky team too, because they always have a lot of pitching. So, Boston's going to be solid. They got some nice acquisitions as well. But
don't forget too, if Bregman goes to Boston, I think you could see the AL East potentially getting 3 teams like we had last year in the Central with us and the Royals making the playoffs, with New York, Baltimore, and Boston. So that would not be necessarily easy, or, even if you will, I think any of those matchups for us would be extremely competitive.
So what did Baltimore do to get better? I mean, I know they're a pretty young team, or they had some pretty good young prospects, but did they make any vast improvements to say that they're going to take that next step? I mean, maybe, I guess, if Jackson Holiday, improves, but
yeah, I mean, they did lose, Santander,
and the
they
pitcher,
lost some pitching.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, look, their young core, not as young as ours per se, in some aspects. They're a little bit further along in their progression compared to our guys. But and we touched on this last year too. I see a lot of similarities between the two teams, but I think now we own a bit more of a pitching advantage over them, which did show in that last series at home in September, where we needed to win, 2 out of 3, which we did, including a crazy comeback win. So, can't really count those guys out, and they're going to have some guys coming up too. So, I mean, you say addition by subtraction, kind of what we're going through, and Boston is just, Boston's going to be Boston. I don't know what else to say about that, especially if they get Bregman. So, but that's the last time I say his name.
Yeah, he's one of those people that he's like it's like a swear jar. If you mention him, you got to throw a little money in there because it's just like, why? We put you in the same light as Ben Verlander. No, I'm just playing. But
yeah, quick. If Detroit does get him, if they do by some miracle winning lottery number, who gets cut or who gets sent down?
Young for sure at that point, because you got to keep Verlander to kind of play both roles. But it definitely puts McKinstry on the outside looking in, unless McKinstry fares better than Sweeney. Now, if McKinstry tears it up in spring training and Sweeney continues to struggle from the plate, which he did for part of last year, then yeah, I mean, because McKinstry can play many, a number of different positions. Sweeney, I believe, is just exclusively a shortstop, if I'm not mistaken. Although I would assume that he can probably play some second or maybe some third. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree with that.
But yeah, I think you sign Bregman, and it has immediate impact to guys like Young, McKinstry, and possibly Sweeney. But I mean, we become an instant AL, World Series representative, threat at that point for the next couple years. Not only is he a serviceable, a more than serviceable right-handed, run producer, but he's a top tier elite defender, which is going to save a lot of runs as well. So, not holding my breath, but I mean, allegedly we have. There's a chance that he may have to settle. He's gonna have to settle somewhere. I don't know how it's gonna look. I don't know how to look to Bregman if he, comes back to Houston tucking his tail. That may kind of be an awkward situation. So just eliminate the awkward situation and just come to Detroit, man. You're back with your old manager. We can win some championships over here. Just throwing that out there. Hey, either way, you're set for life. You got some bread. Your family comes from money, from what I hear. So orange and blue. Either way, you're gonna wear orange and blue.
If they did, I think that would be a big step forward for Skubal wanting to come back, money aside. I think that would be an absolute, because right now, Flaherty and some of these other guys, they might not be around. I mean, their deals would end before Skubal hits free agency. So I think this would be the big first deposit for the front office to say, you know what, we're serious about continuing to win with you around beyond your rookie deal. So that's my 2 cents.
And I don't think it's about money at this point. I think it's more so about him being in the most ideal situation that he can see, because the team. I mean, not that we're giving out any long-term deals, but I don't think that we were hell-bent on giving Flaherty a long-term deal when it's all said and done. Cobb didn't deserve, hasn't justified that, and neither has Gleyber Torres. So I think we're willing to spend money.
Let's just save him for that divorce now that that's public.
I mean, Illich guy, even regardless of how much money his wife takes, he's well accounted for. So
true.
But yeah, we're gonna wrap it up on that. Stay tuned. Like I said, I have an article dropping tomorrow morning on the player, on some of the position battles that we have going into spring training to look out for. But yeah, we'll be back real soon, especially if Scott Harris wants to drop any more bombs between now in spring training starting or during spring training, whatever. Nolan Arenado, that
that almost looks dead in the water. I mean, it looks
he's got to go somewhere though. But yeah, there's a no trade clause tied to that. So, whatever. Screw him. But yeah, we will be keeping an eye on that and bringing you the breaking news as it's happening. So stay tuned. We'll probably have a show next week in preparation. But please subscribe to Bleachers to Speakers on YouTube. We've had a nice little crowd, not with participation today, but we've had a nice crowd of folks that have stayed with us throughout the show. But you can also catch it on all our audio aggregators at Corner to Copa. It's your boy Foster Child. Got my dog Coach with me. We out of here.
Peace.